The Galactic Dominion had ruled the known universe for over 10,000 years. They had conquered more than 300 species across countless star systems. Some had fought back. Most had surrendered. All had eventually fallen. The Dominion was not cruel by nature. They were simply efficient. They took what they needed from weaker civilizations and moved on. It was the way of the universe. The strong consumed the weak. This was the natural order of things, and no species had ever challenged it successfully. High Arbiter Zelvoth stood at the center of the great council chamber on Station Vireth. He was a towering creature with a hard shell covering his body and compound eyes that showed no emotion. He had overseen the conquest of 17 worlds himself. He knew the pattern well. First came the assessment. Then came the verdict. Then came the harvest. It was always the same. Today he would announce the next target. The representatives of 300 conquered species sat in the darkness around him. They did not speak. They did not protest. They had learned long ago that protest was pointless. The Dominion always won. This was simply how things were. Zelvoth activated the display, and a small blue planet appeared in the center of the chamber. It was a beautiful world covered in oceans and green lands and white clouds. It looked peaceful from this distance. It looked fragile. The primitive world designated Sol 3 has been selected for harvesting, Zelvoth announced. His voice echoed through the massive chamber. The local inhabitants call it Earth. They are a young species. They have only recently discovered space travel. Their technology is primitive. Their military capacity is insignificant by our standards. The operation will commence in 30 standard rotations. No one objected. No one ever did. On the other side of the galaxy, buried deep inside a mountain in a place called Colorado, a young woman named Lisa Morgan was staring at her computer screen. She was a communications officer working for an organization that monitored signals from space. Most of her work was boring. She spent her days listening to static and sorting through data that meant nothing. But tonight was different. Tonight she had found something. The signal had come from deep space. It was clearly artificial. It was clearly a message. And after running it through every translation program they had developed over the years, she had finally decoded it. Her coffee had gone cold hours ago. Her hands were shaking as she read the words on her screen. She read them again. Then a third time. Each time they said the same thing. Earth had been selected for harvesting. The operation would begin in 30 days. "Commander," she called out. Her voice was barely steady. "You need to see this." Commander Jack Reeves walked over from across the room. He was an older man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had spent 30 years in this job preparing for threats that never came. He had always believed something was out there. He had always believed they would find proof someday. But he had never expected it to be like this. He read the message once, then twice. Then a third time. "Get me the president," he said quietly. "And every allied leader on the planet. We have less than a month." The next 48 hours were chaos. World leaders were pulled from their beds and briefed in secure rooms. Military commanders studied the message and tried to understand what they were facing. Scientists analyzed the signal and confirmed it was real. Diplomats argued about what to do. Some wanted to announce the truth to the world. Others feared the panic that would follow. In the end, they chose secrecy. The public would not be told. Not yet. Not until they had a plan. But what plan could there be? The message made it clear that the Dominion had conquered hundreds of species. They had technology that humanity could not even imagine. Earth had no weapons that could fight them. Earth had no ships that could reach them. Earth had nothing. The United Nations held an emergency closed session. The arguments lasted for days. Some delegates called for immediate surrender. If the Dominion was as powerful as the message suggested, then resistance was pointless. Better to submit and survive than to fight and die. Others refused to accept this. They demanded that humanity fight back. They spoke of honor and courage and freedom. They gave passionate speeches about never giving up. But when asked what weapons they would use, they had no answer. When asked how they would win, they fell silent. It was during this chaos that a quiet man in the back of the room stood up and asked a simple question. His name was Nathan Cole. He was not a soldier or a diplomat or a scientist. He was a historian. He had been brought in to analyze the cultural data contained in the alien message. He had spent 3 days studying everything they knew about the Dominion, and now he had something to say. "Has anyone actually responded to them yet?" he asked. The room went silent. Everyone turned to look at him. "What would be the point?" the French delegate asked. "We cannot fight them. We cannot negotiate with them. What could we possibly say?" "One," Nathan smiled. It was a strange smile. It made several people in the room uncomfortable. "Who said anything about fighting or negotiating?" he said. The delegate frowned. "Then what do you suggest?" Nathan walked to the front of the room. He was not an impressive man to look at. He was average height, with brown hair and glasses. He looked like a teacher, which is exactly what he was. But there was something in his eyes now. Something that had not been there before. "I have spent my entire life studying human history," he said. "I know our species better than most. I know what we have done to each other over thousands of years. I know the wars we have fought, the weapons we have built, the things we have done in the name of survival." He paused and looked around the room. "The Dominion has conquered 300 species. They must believe they understand how civilizations work. They must believe they know how we will react. They expect us to either fight or surrender. Those are the only 2 options in their minds." He smiled again. That same unsettling smile. "But what if we do neither? What if we show them something they have never seen before? What if we show them what humanity really is?" The room was silent. Everyone was watching him now. "What exactly are you proposing?" Commander Reeves asked. Nathan looked at him. "I am proposing that we send them a message. Not a surrender. Not a declaration of war. Something else entirely. Something that will make them understand exactly what kind of species they are dealing with." He paused. "I am proposing that we scare them." The message took 7 days to create. Nathan Cole worked with a team of experts from around the world. There were linguists who helped craft the words. There were psychologists who understood how minds worked. There were military strategists who knew about war. There were historians who knew about humanity. They all came together in a secure facility deep underground, and they worked day and night to create something that had never been created before. They were not building a weapon. They were building a warning. Nathan stood at the center of it all. He directed the work. He made the final decisions. He knew exactly what he wanted to say. He had been thinking about it since the moment he first read the alien message. He understood something that the others did not. The Dominion was powerful. The Dominion was ancient. But the Dominion had a weakness. They had never met anything like humanity before. On the 7th night, Nathan sat alone in his room and wrote the final draft himself. The others had contributed pieces. They had offered suggestions. But the final words came from him. He wrote them slowly and carefully. He chose each sentence with purpose. When he was finished, he read it once and knew it was right. The message was broadcast the next morning. Every radio telescope on Earth aimed at the same point in space. Every transmitter sent the same signal. The message flew across the void at the speed of light, aimed directly at the coordinates from which the alien transmission had come. The Dominion received it within hours. High Arbiter Zelvoth was resting in his private chambers when his aide rushed in. The aide was a nervous creature with too many limbs and eyes that never stopped moving. He looked more nervous than usual. "Arbiter," the aide said. "The humans have responded." Zelvoth's mandibles clicked in amusement. This was not unusual. Many species sent messages when they learned they had been selected. Some begged for mercy. Some offered tribute. Some made empty threats. It was all the same in the end. "What do they say?" Zelvoth asked. "Do they wish to surrender?" The aide hesitated. His many limbs twitched. "No, Arbiter. They sent a history." "A history?" "Yes, Arbiter. A history of themselves. A record of their species." Zelvoth took the data tablet from his aide and began to read. At first he was confused. The message contained no pleas. There were no negotiations. There were no offers of surrender. There were no threats of resistance. Instead, there was simply information. Page after page of information about the human species and what they had done to each other over thousands of years. The message began with war. It described how humans had spent their entire existence fighting each other. Not aliens, not outside threats, each other. They had fought over land and resources and ideas and religion and power. They had never stopped fighting. Even in times of peace, they prepared for the next war. War was part of their nature. War was in their blood. The message listed weapons that humans had built, not to fight alien invaders but to kill other humans. Nuclear bombs that could destroy entire cities in seconds. Chemical weapons that made victims choke on their own lungs. Biological agents that could spread disease across continents. Humans had created these things to use on themselves. The message described a concept called mutually assured destruction. During something called the Cold War, humans had pointed enough nuclear weapons at each other to destroy their entire planet multiple times over. Both sides knew that if they attacked, the other side would strike back. Both sides would be destroyed. Everyone would die. And humans had considered this a form of peace. They had lived this way for decades. The message described battles where millions of humans died fighting over small patches of mud. It described tactics where small groups of humans defeated much larger forces by refusing to stop fighting. It described soldiers who flew their planes directly into enemy ships knowing they would die. It described soldiers who threw themselves onto explosives to save their companions. The message described something called spite. This was a human emotion. It meant that humans would sometimes choose to destroy themselves if it meant also destroying their enemy. They would accept their own death if they could take their enemy with them. This was not rational. This was not logical. But it was human. The message continued for many pages. It described atrocities that humans had committed against each other. It described the lengths they would go to for revenge. It described how humans never forgot an insult and never forgave an enemy. It described a concept called scorched earth, where humans would destroy their own land and cities rather than let an enemy take them. And then came the final part of the message. "We know we cannot defeat you," the message said. "We know that your technology is superior. We know that your forces are stronger. We know that you will probably destroy us. But we want you to understand something about humanity before you come. We have never in our entire history surrendered to an enemy we hated. We do not know how. And we have already decided that we hate you. If you come to Earth, you will win eventually. But you will pay for every inch of our world in blood. We will poison our own food. We will salt our own Earth. We will burn our own cities before we let you take them. We will infect ourselves with our worst diseases and spread them to your soldiers. Every human who dies will try to take as many of you with them as possible. Your soldiers will learn to fear our children. And when the last human falls, we will make sure it is on top of a detonator." The message ended with one final line. "We are not a species that knows how to lose gracefully. Come and find out what that means." Zelvoth read the message 3 times. His compound eyes showed no emotion, but his mandibles had stopped clicking. For the first time in his long career, he did not know what to say. He had conquered 17 worlds. He had seen species fight. He had seen species surrender. But he had never seen anything like this. This was not a declaration of war. This was not a surrender. This was something else entirely. This was a promise. He reached for his communication device and opened a channel to the council chamber. "Emergency session," he said. "All delegates." Immediately, the aide watched him with nervous eyes. "Arbiter? Is something wrong?" Zelvoth did not answer. He was still staring at the message, at the final line, at the promise that humanity had made. Come and find out what that means. For the first time in 10,000 years, the High Arbiter of the Galactic Dominion felt something he did not recognize. It took him a moment to identify it. He had not felt it since he was young. He had not felt it since before he joined the Dominion. It was doubt. The council chamber erupted into chaos the moment the message was displayed. 300 delegates from 300 conquered species all began speaking at once. Some shouted in anger. Some whispered in fear. Some sat in stunned silence and simply stared at the words floating in the air before them. Delegate Vorn was the first to find his voice above the noise. He was a bulbous creature from a species called the Thelans. His people had surrendered to the Dominion 3,000 years ago, without firing a single shot. They had calculated the odds and seen that resistance was pointless. They had submitted and survived. This was the rational choice. This was the only choice. "This is absurd," Vorn shouted. His voice was thick and wet like water moving through pipes. "They are primitives. They have barely left their own planet. They cannot possibly pose a threat to the Dominion." "Then why are you shouting?" asked another voice. Everyone turned to look at the speaker. She was Delegate Wyrus from a species called the Vendari. Her people had not surrendered easily. They had fought the Dominion for 300 years before they were finally broken. Millions had died. Their civilization had been shattered. But Eurus still remembered. She still carried the anger of her ancestors in her heart. "I have seen this before," Eurus said calmly. "My people were like this once. We refused to surrender. We fought even when we knew we could not win. We burned our own cities. We destroyed our own food. We made the Dominion pay for every victory in blood." She paused and looked around the chamber. "The Dominion broke us eventually. But it cost them dearly. And if the humans are anything like their message suggests, they will cost the Dominion even more." "Enough," Zelvoth commanded. His voice cut through the noise and silenced the chamber. "I did not call this session for debate. I called it for analysis. General Krath, step forward." A massive figure emerged from the shadows at the edge of the chamber. General Krath was a warrior. His species had been engineered for combat thousands of years ago. He was covered in scars from battles on 47 different worlds. He had overseen more conquests than any other living commander. If anyone understood war, it was him. "General," Zelvoth said, "I want your tactical assessment. What are our projected losses for this conquest?" Krath was silent for a long moment. His scarred face showed no emotion, but his eyes were distant. He was calculating. He was thinking. Finally, he spoke. "Based on the human message and our intelligence on their history, I estimate significant casualties." "Define significant." Another pause. Longer this time. "We have never encountered a species with this psychological profile," Krath said slowly. "Most species are rational. They calculate the odds. They see that they cannot win. They surrender, or they fight briefly and then surrender. This is normal. This is expected." He gestured at the message, still floating in the air. "The humans are not rational. They do not calculate odds. They do not accept defeat. Their own history shows that they will fight to the last individual even when victory is impossible. They will destroy themselves rather than submit. This is not normal. This is not expected. But surely we can defeat them," Vorn said. "Our technology is superior. Our forces are stronger." "Yes," Krath agreed. "We will defeat them. Eventually. But their message indicates they know this. They are not trying to win. They are trying to make us pay such a high price that victory becomes meaningless." He paused again. "They have nuclear weapons capable of rendering their entire planet uninhabitable. Their message indicates they would use them. They have chemical and biological weapons designed to kill on massive scales. Their message indicates they would use those too. They would infect their own population with deadly diseases and send them to embrace our soldiers." The chamber was silent now. Even Vorn had stopped objecting. "My projections suggest casualties in the millions," Krath continued. "Possibly tens of millions. The conquest could take years, perhaps decades. The humans would fight in their cities. They would fight in their mountains. They would fight in their forests and deserts and oceans. Every building would be a fortress. Every civilian would be a soldier. Every child would be a weapon. Then we destroy the planet from orbit." Someone suggested. "Glass, the entire surface. Kill them all, before they can resist." Zelvoth turned sharply toward the voice. "And prove to the entire galaxy that we fear them? No. That is not an option. The Dominion rules through the perception of invincibility. The moment we show fear is the moment our empire begins to crumble." "There is another concern," Krath said. "The human message was broadcast openly. Every species in the Dominion has received it. They are all watching now. They are all waiting to see what we do. He looked directly at Zelvoth. If we achieve a swift and decisive victory, then nothing changes. But if this conquest becomes protracted or costly, then the consequences could be severe. The conquered species will begin to wonder if resistance is possible. They will begin to remember what they were before they surrendered. Across the chamber, Eurus smiled quietly to herself. She remembered. She had never stopped remembering. "So we are trapped," Zelvoth said. His mandibles clicked slowly. "We cannot retreat, because it shows weakness. We cannot destroy them from orbit because it shows fear. And we cannot conquer them quickly, because they will not allow it. There is one more thing," Krath said. "Something that concerns me more than their weapons or their tactics." "What is that?" Their message was not just a warning, it was an invitation. They told us exactly what they are capable of. They showed us their history. They revealed their psychology. No rational species would do this. Rational species hide their weaknesses. Rational species pretend to be stronger than they are. He paused. The humans did the opposite. They showed us their worst qualities. Their violence. Their spite. Their capacity for self-destruction. They wanted us to see it. They wanted us to understand. "Why would they do that?" Vorn asked. Krath looked at him with ancient eyes. "Because they want us to be afraid." The chamber fell silent again. 300 delegates from 300 conquered species all sat in the darkness, thinking the same thought. The humans had done something unprecedented. They had not begged or threatened or negotiated. They had simply told the truth about themselves, and the truth was terrifying. Zelvoth stood at the center of it all. He had ruled the Dominion for 500 years. He had never felt uncertain before. He had never doubted a decision, but now he stood in silence and wondered what to do next. The debate would continue for days. The arguments would grow more heated. But something had already changed. Something fundamental. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Galactic Dominion was afraid of a primitive species on a small blue planet, and they did not know what to do about it. On Earth, the waiting was the hardest part. The message had been sent. The words had crossed the void of space. Now there was nothing to do but wait and see if they would receive a response. Days passed, then weeks. The silence stretched on, and every hour felt like a year. Lisa Morgan had not left her station in 2 weeks. She had barely slept. She had barely eaten. She sat in front of her screens and monitored every frequency and every wavelength, searching for any sign of a response. The message they had sent was either going to save humanity or doom it. She did not know which. No one did. Her coffee had gone cold again. She did not notice. She was watching the screens, always watching. Commander Reeves came to stand beside her. He had aged 10 years in 2 weeks. His hair was grayer. His face was more lined. The weight of the world had settled onto his shoulders, and it was crushing him slowly. "Anything?" he asked. "Nothing yet," Lisa said. She did not look away from the screens. "Maybe they are planning their attack. Maybe they are gathering their forces. Maybe the message did not work. Or maybe it did work." Lisa finally turned to look at him. There was something in her eyes. Something fragile. Something that might have been hope. "Do you think they are scared?" she asked. Reeves did not answer. He did not know what to think anymore. He had spent his entire career preparing for this moment. He had always believed that humanity would face a threat from the stars someday. But he had never imagined it would be like this. He had never imagined they would have nothing to fight with, except words. "I do not know," he said finally. "But Nathan seemed to think this would work. And he knows more about people than anyone I have ever met." Nathan Cole had returned to his university after the message was sent. There was nothing more he could do at the command center. The words were already flying through space. The plan was already in motion. All he could do now was wait like everyone else. So he taught his classes. He graded papers. He met with students and answered their questions. He acted as if nothing had changed. As if the world was not holding its breath. As if humanity was not waiting to learn if it would survive. But every night he sat by his radio and listened to the static. Waiting. Hoping. Fearing. His colleague Amy Lynn found him there one evening. She was a professor of anthropology, and one of the few people outside the government who knew the truth. She had helped Nathan craft parts of the message. She understood what they had tried to do. "Do you think it worked?" she asked. She sat down beside him in the dim light of his office. Nathan considered the question for a long time before answering. "I think for the first time in their existence, the Dominion is dealing with something they do not understand. Every other civilization they have conquered was rational. They calculated the odds. They saw that they could not win. They surrendered. It was the logical choice." He smiled slightly. "Humans are not always logical. We do not always make the rational choice. We hold grudges. We seek revenge. We would rather die fighting than live on our knees. This is not something the Dominion has encountered before. This is not something they know how to deal with." "But what if they come anyway?" Amy asked. "What if they decide to conquer us regardless of the cost? Then we fight, and we make them regret it. Do you really think we could hurt them?" Nathan turned to look at her. His eyes were tired, but there was something burning behind them. A certainty that had not been there before. "I think we could make the cost so high that every other conquered species in their empire would start to wonder if they made the right choice." The Dominion rules through fear. They rule because everyone believes they cannot be beaten. But what happens when a primitive species on a small blue planet makes them bleed? What happens when the conquest takes years instead of days? What happens when millions of their soldiers die fighting farmers and teachers and children? He paused. The conquered species are watching. 300 civilizations are waiting to see what happens. If we submit, then nothing changes. The Dominion remains invincible. But if we fight, and we make them pay, and we refuse to break even when we are losing, then something changes. A crack appears in the foundation of their empire. A small crack at first, but cracks grow, cracks spread, and eventually cracks bring down even the mightiest structures. Amy was silent for a long moment. She was thinking about what he said. She was thinking about 300 species watching and waiting. She was thinking about hope. "You did not just send them a warning," she said finally. "You sent everyone a message." Nathan nodded slowly. "The Dominion will understand that eventually. They will realize that the real danger is not what we can do to them. The real danger is what our resistance might inspire in others." Across the planet, the waiting continued. Governments maintained their silence. The public still did not know the truth. But people sensed that something was wrong. Churches filled with people seeking comfort. Crime rates dropped as neighbors came together. Families gathered and held each other close. The world was changing in small ways that no one could quite explain. In secret military installations, soldiers trained for a battle they knew they could not win. In laboratories, scientists worked on weapons they hoped they would never have to use. In government offices, leaders argued about what to do if the silence ended. Everyone was preparing. Everyone was waiting. The days stretched into weeks. The silence continued. And then, on the 31st day, everything changed. Lisa Morgan was at her station when the signal came in. She almost missed it at first. It was faint and brief, and nothing like the original message they had received. But it was there, a response from across the galaxy. Her hands shook as she decoded it. Her heart pounded in her chest. She read the words once, and then again, and then a third time, because she could not believe what she was seeing. "Commander," she said. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Commander, you need to see this." Reeves walked over slowly. He was afraid to hope. He had been afraid to hope for weeks. But something in Lisa's voice made him move faster. Something in her eyes made his heart race. She turned the screen so he could see the words, and for the first time in 31 days, Jack Reeves allowed himself to smile. The message from the Galactic Dominion was brief. It was formal. It was written in the cold language of bureaucracy. And it changed everything. The Galactic Dominion Council has reviewed the status of Sol 3 and determined that the planet does not meet the criteria for harvesting at this time. The system has been designated as a restricted zone. No Dominion vessels will enter Sol space. This designation is effective immediately and indefinitely. Lisa Morgan read the message aloud to a room full of silent officers. She read it once, and then again because no one seemed to believe it. The words hung in the air like a miracle that no one had dared to pray for. Commander Reeves sat down heavily in his chair. His hands were shaking, his eyes were wet. The weight that had been crushing him for weeks suddenly lifted, and he felt like he might float away. "We won," he said quietly. "We actually won." Lisa shook her head slowly. "No, we did not win. We made them decide it was not worth finding out if they could beat us." "Is there a difference?" Lisa thought about it for a moment. Then she smiled. "Maybe not. Maybe not." The news spread across Earth within hours. There was no official announcement at first. Governments were too stunned to craft one. But the truth leaked anyway. It always did. Whispers became rumors. Rumors became reports. Reports became headlines. Humanity had faced extinction. Humanity had refused to surrender. And the most powerful empire in the galaxy had blinked. The celebrations lasted for weeks. People danced in the streets. Strangers hugged each other. Enemies put aside their differences and shared drinks. For one brief moment, the entire human race was united in joy and relief and disbelief. But even as the celebrations continued, something else was happening. Something quieter. Something that would prove far more important in the years to come. Messages began to arrive. They came from across the galaxy. They came from species that had been conquered by the Dominion centuries ago. They came in coded transmissions and hidden frequencies. They came carefully and quietly, because the senders were afraid of being discovered. But they all asked the same thing: how did you do it? Nathan Cole was the one who received most of these messages. He had returned to his university after the crisis ended, but he found himself spending more and more time at his radio. Not listening for threats this time. Listening for questions. Listening for hope. The first message came from the Vendari. Their delegate Wyrus had remembered what it felt like to resist. She had watched humanity stand against the Dominion, and something inside her had awakened, something that had been sleeping for 300 years. "We want to understand," the message said. "We want to know how you found the courage to refuse. Our ancestors knew this courage once. We have forgotten it. Can you help us remember?" Nathan spent 3 days crafting his response. He did not send them military strategies. He did not send them weapon designs. He sent them something else entirely. He sent them stories. He told them about humans who had fought against impossible odds throughout history. He told them about small nations that had resisted great empires. He told them about individuals who had refused to break even under torture. He told them about the human capacity for hope and defiance, and stubborn unwillingness to accept defeat. He told them that the Dominion was not invincible. That no empire lasted forever. That even the mightiest power could be brought down if enough people refused to accept its authority. He sent them hope. More messages came after that. Dozens at first. Then hundreds. Species that had been silent for millennia began to whisper to each other. They shared the stories that Nathan had sent. They shared their own stories of resistance from before the conquest. They began to remember who they had been before they surrendered. The Dominion did not realize what was happening at first. They were too focused on the embarrassment of their retreat from Earth. High Arbiter Zelvoth faced criticism from all sides. Some said he had been weak. Others said he had been wise. The debates consumed the council for months. By the time they noticed the whispers, it was already too late. 5 years after the day Earth was marked for harvesting the first Dominion world fell to internal rebellion. It was a small planet on the outer edge of their empire. The species there had been conquered so long ago that no one remembered their original name, but they remembered now. They remembered who they had been. They remembered how to fight. They called themselves the Free People's Alliance. Their flag bore a symbol that humans would have recognized immediately. A clenched fist raised against the sky. The symbol of resistance. The symbol of defiance. The symbol of hope. Their battle cry spread across the galaxy in 1,000 different languages, but the meaning was always the same. They can be beaten. More rebellions followed. Not all of them succeeded. Many were crushed. But each one weakened the Dominion. Each one proved that resistance was possible. Each one inspired others to try. High Arbiter Zelvoth watched it all from his chambers on Station Varath. He had ruled the Dominion for 500 years. He had overseen the conquest of 17 worlds. He had believed that his empire would last forever. Now he watched it begin to crumble. He thought about the message from Earth. He thought about the humans who had refused to surrender. He thought about the warning they had sent and the promise they had made. He had believed they were bluffing. He had believed their message was mere bravado. He had retreated because the cost seemed too high. But he had not truly believed that a primitive species could threaten his empire. He understood now that he had been wrong. The humans had not just sent a warning, they had sent an idea. And ideas were more dangerous than any weapon. Ideas could not be bombed into submission. Ideas could not be conquered. Ideas spread from mind to mind like a fire that could never be extinguished. The idea the humans had sent was simple. It was ancient. It was the most dangerous idea in the universe. Tyranny can be resisted. Zelvoth stood at his window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there on a small blue planet, a species of irrational, violent, spiteful creatures was going about their daily lives. They were teaching their children, they were building their cities, they were preparing for a future they had almost lost. And across the galaxy their message was still spreading. Their hope was still growing. Their defiance was still inspiring others to stand up and fight. The Dominion had ruled for 10,000 years. But now, for the first time, their subjects believed it could end. And that belief was more powerful than any fleet, more dangerous than any army, more unstoppable than any force the Dominion had ever faced. The humans had not defeated the Galactic Dominion with weapons or soldiers. They had defeated it with a promise. And humanity always kept its promises.